Our next guest is Tom Rudge, and Tom is the chair of the GE Free Yukon movement and has been a food advocate for many years. Tom has a degree in agriculture from the University of Alberta, and he owns a mixed organic farm and is a full-time farmer. He's the White Horse Slow Food Convivial Chair and the secretary for the White Horse chapter of the Canadian Organic Growers. Great. And he was instrumental in setting up the White Horse Community Market in the year 2004. He writes articles for the local news magazines and volunteers time to operate a non-profit booth at the market to promote organic agriculture and also offer information on the GE Free Yukon campaign. So Tom and the GE Free Organising Committee have gathered over 1,500 signatures last fall to present to the Yukon legislature for a moratorium on GE crops in the Yukon. And this actually raised the awareness of the issue so that now the farmers in the Yukon are actually questioning the efficacy of this technology and the corporate movement pushing it forward. So big welcome for Tom Rudge.
I'm not afraid to speak to strangers. I do it all the time. My name is Tom and I'm a food advocate. I'd like to thank the sponsors for their support and contribution, Mountain Equipment Co-op, GE Free BC, and Greenpeace. Thank you. I'd also like to thank all the volunteers that make this possible, that we could be here, all the people sitting at the tables, and all the organizers that help make it happen. Last, but definitely not least, I'd like to thank the people who turned out for this, because you are the solution to this whole issue. It's you. I'm what you might call the warm-up act tonight for Percy. I'm the token peasant farmer from the Yukon. And yes, we do farm in the Yukon. We do have farms. But compared to Percy, I am Mr. GMO Light. I'd like to talk to you about the campaign to make the Yukon a GE-free zone. It's an awareness issue, and the more people that know about what is happening inside the Yukon, the better. And as of right now, we do not have any GM crops growing in the Yukon. Many of you are waiting to hear all the great, dirty little topics about genetic engineering. I'll say up front that in my little presentation, I don't mention names like Monsanto, Cargill, Aventis, DuPont. Percy will indulge you very, very well with these folks. I believe that for any problem, there arises an opportunity. Multinational seed corporations are one huge problem. I really have a great opportunity. I don't know how many of you have ever heard of the movie or read the book called The Corporation by Joel Bakan. It was a great, great read. He describes a corporation as an entity with no moral compunction or remorse for its actions beyond how it best serves itself. If you applied that to a person, they would be called a psychopath. If you understand this concept, the actions of multinational agribusinesses almost make sense. Over the years, I have become more and more involved with food advocacy, and in 2004, I attended the Slow Food World Gathering of Food Communities. That 4-day conference in Italy gave me the inspiration and the motivation to do more about food issues at home in the Yukon. Here in Canada, we live in a bubble. We don't suffer horrendous natural disasters to the extent that southern countries do. We don't have wars on our land here. We have clean, available water. We have a fairly democratic political system. And we have the best healthcare system in the world. So my questions are, why do we put up with corporations trying to take over the food system by patenting seeds? Why do we let that happen? Why do we risk our health by eating unlabeled food and untested ingredients? Why do we support a system of food inspection that is failing us? And why do we expect farmers to be the least paid employees on the food chain? For my sake, and the sake of my family and friends, I will no longer sit idly by and watch our food system being manipulated and taken over by multinational seed and chemical companies. Along with my wife and 2 children, my teenagers, we own and operate a 160-acre farm 35 kilometers outside of Whitehorse, up in the Yukon. Our land is certified organic and has been in production since 2000 when we first moved there. Just to put things in a little bit of perspective for you, the Yukon is roughly half the size of BC. Our population there is 31,000 on a good year. In BC, your population is just under 4.4 million. So comparatively speaking, we're like a community. According to the recent Department of Agriculture survey, there are 148 farms in the Yukon. These range from small holdings of several acres to larger farms, excuse me, Percy, larger farms of 100 acres. A slight twist to this is the fact that the dog mushers and outfitters are included in this survey. 40 farms reported using organic methods. However, there are only 3 certified organic farms in the Yukon, with 3 more in transition this year. The Yukon has been thought of as the land of the magic and mystery. Today, there is a vibrant and well-spoken percentage of the public who advocate for sustainable living methods and stewardship of the environment. These are the same people that originally proposed the idea for the Yukon to be a genetically modified free zone several years ago. I was at the meeting when we talked about this. I raised my hand, and now I'm here. So don't stick your hand in here. Since that time, a petition, as was said, the petition with 1,500 signatures was presented to the Yukon Legislative Assembly last fall asking for a 10-year moratorium on the planting of any genetically engineered crops in the Yukon. The minister responsible for agriculture responded to the petition in the legislature by saying, to date, neither Health Canada nor the Canadian Health Food Inspection Agency nor Environment Canada have seen any reason to ban this technology. Genetically engineered crops have been on our store shelves for over a decade, and Health Canada has not raised any concerns. But you have to realize that Health Canada and the CFIA have never undertaken any long-term studies to know if there is any reason to ban this technology. As Colin said, they rely on tests having been done by the manufacturers, and our government calls them novel foods. They're substantially equivalent. They're okay. If they look like an orange, kind of tastes like an orange, it's an orange. Without labeling of processed foods, how would anybody know what might possibly be affecting their health? Again, no long-term tests have been done. My wife told me one day, she said, you know, pick up a can of that processed food. If you can't read the ingredients, don't buy the damn stuff. If you can't pronounce what it is, why buy it? You're putting it in your body. The agriculture minister said, what he said is quite typical of political thinking, and he relies on his policymakers and handlers to write his words. To date, he has never offered to meet with our group, and as of last Thursday, we have another minister responsible for the agriculture portfolio, so we have a new round of discussions coming up. This spring, the organizing committee undertook a strategic planning session. Our goal is to raise public awareness of the issue of genetically engineered life forms and to make the GE Free Yukon a priority for all political parties in the next territorial election in about 2.5 years. Our strategy is to educate the public, industry, organizations, and political parties, communicate the message of a GE Free Yukon to you, the consumer, build partnerships, build GE Free Yukon organization, strengthen it, and develop options and solutions to keep Yukon GE free. To achieve the goals in our strategic plan, we have developed initiatives and follow-up activities, and each of these activities will have a time frame and measurable outcome applied to it. It sounds quite businesslike, and it has to be to make sense to the bureaucratic people and process and for your consumer support. 2 years ago, we didn't assume the government would readily accept and commit to a petition asking for a 10-year moratorium. Governments rarely, if ever, do this. They rarely look at a petition and say, yeah, this is great, let's just do it. They send it back to their executive council, they study it, they look at it, and they come back with their comments. The petition, in actuality, was a wake-up call for the government, however. People are asking for a change, and there is voter support on the line. At this point, people ask me how the campaign is doing and if we've succeeded. In the organizing committee's mind, there is no end to this campaign. It isn't about pulling the off switch, shutting it down, saying, we're done now. This campaign has benchmarks to reach, and it is about increasing the awareness of people in the Yukon to food issues. The farmers in the Yukon are not willing to go it alone and introduce any GE crops into the Yukon. It's a very small community where no one wants to be the first to try anything different or controversial. The Agriculture Department of the government is taking direction from the farmers and will not undertake any studies of their own requiring a genetically engineered crop. The government, although they haven't agreed to a moratorium yet, stated that we support our agriculture industry and we support an industry that supplies local foods, contributes to community well-being, drives the economy, and is environmentally sustainable. So it sounds good. The Yukon is slowly becoming a safe haven for the small number of farmers in operation. Although no one really wants to ignore good technology or advances in agricultural techniques, no one is willing to throw down the hat and try any genetically engineered seed. Local, healthy food, organic, farmers market, farm gate, community-supported agriculture, value-added are becoming common terms in our food language now. Food security in a place as remote as the Yukon dictates we must learn to save our own seed. We must not rely on seed, fertilizer, or chemicals from the south. This year it cost approximately $500 for a ton of seed oats in Alberta, but it cost $1,500 to ship it to the Yukon. To grow out and sell that same product as a feed or seed is just not sustainable. To attempt to substitute a fuel with a food crop is also a mistake. In the Yukon, we cannot grow enough to currently feed the population, so why would we take land out of food production to grow a fuel, especially if anybody ever mentioned doing it with a GE crop? Genetically engineered seed has no advantage in the Yukon. There has never been any seed developed by any of these companies that is frost hardy or has a shorter growing season. There is no seed developed anywhere by any seed company that would offer any increased health benefits to anyone, let alone the people in the Yukon. As a critical thinker, I don't take things for granted, and I ask for sources when it seems prudent. I might respect genetically engineered seed if the process was open to public scrutiny and was proven to be safe. I might respect it. If there were long-term independent health studies proving beyond a doubt that the ingestion of pesticides and chemical residues, antibiotic markers, promoter genes, terminator sequences wouldn't affect me or my children, I would feel somewhat better. If the seed were produced in a controlled environment, not open field studies, and tested by an independent lab for safety, much like today's drugs are, I would feel better. If the seed system was cooperatively owned or regulated with public input, I'd feel better. If farmers from southern countries of the world could grow their own seeds and help to maintain genetic diversity throughout the world and would not be coerced into signing contracts to multinationals, I'd feel better. If farmers could make a living producing food and seeds and keep them to maintain a biodiversity within their own farm and get paid a living wage, I might even be happy. Although there is no immediate impetus by the Yukon government to create legislation to keep genetically engineered crops out of the Yukon, there is a growing awareness and consumer support for more sustainable farming methods and for a healthy, locally grown food. I said it earlier today and I repeat it. Last night I heard a wonderful statement. Somebody said, growing seeds is my freedom of expression. I'd never ever want to lose that. For a national or international flavor on these GE issues, Percy has an incredible amount of knowledge and experience and has traveled the world talking to the audiences. As I said, I'm only the warm-up act on this. Thank you for your time, and you are the solution.